Imagine learning a new language in 3 months instead of 3 years. Imagine mastering a complex skill in weeks instead of waiting years. Imagine reading a book and actually retaining what you learned instead of forgetting it within days. This isn't fantasy. It's not about being a genius or having a photographic memory. It's about learning how to learn, and once you master this meta skill, everything changes. Welcome to Speed Learning Mastery, where you'll discover the science-backed methods that accelerate learning, the techniques used by polymaths who master multiple fields, and the exact framework for acquiring any skill faster than you ever thought possible. This audiobook will transform you from someone who struggles to learn into someone who devours knowledge and masters skills with remarkable speed. Here's a truth that will shock you. Most of what you were taught about learning in school is wrong. Highlighting text doesn't work. Rereading chapters is ineffective. Cramming the night before destroys long-term retention. Passive listening to lectures creates the illusion of learning without actual understanding. The traditional education system taught you methods that feel productive but produce minimal results. Meanwhile, there's a small group of people who learn exponentially faster than everyone else. They master languages in months. They develop complex skills in weeks. They absorb information from books and retain it permanently. They seem to have superhuman learning abilities. But here's the secret. They're not superhuman. They've simply learned the science of accelerated learning and apply specific techniques that multiply their learning efficiency. Let me share a story that illustrates this perfectly. Two people decide to learn programming. Person A uses traditional methods, watches tutorial videos passively, takes notes, rereads them, tries to memorize syntax. After 6 months, they can write basic code but struggle with anything complex and forget what they learned within weeks. Person B uses accelerated learning methods, actively builds projects immediately, uses spaced repetition for key concepts, teaches what they learn to others, deliberately practices challenging problems with immediate feedback. After 6 months, Person B is building complex applications and has deep, permanent understanding. Same starting point. Same 6 months. Completely different outcomes. The difference wasn't intelligence or prior experience. It was learning methodology. Person B learned how to learn effectively. Person A used ineffective traditional methods. That's the power of speed learning mastery. In this audiobook, you'll discover the neuroscience of learning and how your brain actually acquires knowledge, meta-learning principles that allow you to learn how to learn anything, the Feynman Technique for deep understanding instead of superficial memorization, spaced repetition systems that make forgetting nearly impossible, active recall strategies that multiply retention by 5 to 10 times, the 80-20 principle applied to skill acquisition for maximum efficiency with minimum effort, deliberate practice methods that compress years of learning into months, and how to build learning systems that compound over time. But this isn't just theory. Every technique comes with practical applications you can implement immediately. You'll see exactly how to apply these methods to learning languages, technical skills, academic subjects, business knowledge, creative abilities, and any other domain you choose to master. Here's what makes this approach revolutionary. You're not learning faster by working harder or studying more hours. You're learning faster by working smarter, using methods aligned with how your brain actually functions. Most people use tremendous effort with inefficient methods and get poor results. Speed learners use strategic effort with efficient methods and get extraordinary results. Think about the implications. If you can learn twice as fast as your peers, you have double the knowledge and skills in the same time frame. If you can learn 3 times as fast, you can master 3 fields while others are still struggling with one. This compounds over your lifetime into an enormous advantage. The person who masters learning becomes unstoppable because they can acquire whatever knowledge or skills their goals require. Before we dive deep, I want to address a common misconception. Speed learning is not about superficial knowledge or shortcuts that skip real understanding. It's the opposite. Speed learning techniques create deeper understanding and more permanent retention than traditional methods. You're not sacrificing quality for speed. You're achieving both quality and speed by using scientifically validated methods instead of outdated educational traditions. The ability to learn quickly is the ultimate competitive advantage in the modern world. Technology changes rapidly. Industries evolve constantly. The skills that make you valuable today might be obsolete tomorrow. The person who can rapidly acquire new skills adapts, thrives, and leads. The person who learns slowly gets left behind. Which person will you be? Your transformation starts now. You're about to learn techniques that will permanently change how you acquire knowledge and skills. These aren't minor improvements. These are multipliers that can make you 5 times, 10 times, even 20 times more efficient at learning than you are today. Let's begin your journey to speed learning mastery. Understand Chapter 1. The neuroscience of learning. How your brain actually learns. Before we explore specific speed learning techniques, you need to understand how your brain actually learns. Because when you know how the mechanism works, you can optimize it. And when you optimize learning, you accelerate it dramatically. Let's start with a fundamental truth. Your brain is not a storage device like a hard drive where information is simply saved. Your brain is a dynamic, living network that learns through physical changes in neural connections. Every time you learn something, your brain physically changes. Understanding this process is the foundation of speed learning. The key concept is neuroplasticity, your brain's ability to reorganize itself by forming new neural connections throughout life. For centuries, scientists believed adult brains were fixed and unchangeable. We now know that's completely false. Your brain remains plastic and capable of learning throughout your entire life. This is incredibly empowering because it means you can learn anything at any age if you use the right methods. Here's how learning actually works at the neurological level. When you encounter new information, neurons in your brain fire. When the same neurons fire together repeatedly, the connections between them strengthen. This is called Hebbian learning, often summarized as neurons that fire together, wire together. The more you activate a specific neural pathway, the stronger and faster that pathway becomes. Think of it like creating trails through a forest. The first time you walk a path, you're pushing through dense undergrowth. It's difficult and slow. But if you walk the same path repeatedly, you clear the brush, compact the soil, and eventually create a well-worn trail that's easy to travel quickly. Your neural pathways work the same way. Initial learning is difficult because you're creating new pathways. But with repetition and reinforcement, those pathways become efficient superhighways that allow rapid recall and application. This has profound implications for how you should learn. First implication: passive exposure is nearly worthless. If you just read or listen to information without actively engaging with it, you're barely activating neurons. The neural pathway remains weak. This is why rereading or rewatching content feels productive but produces minimal learning. You're traveling the path so lightly that it never gets cleared. Second implication: active engagement creates strong learning. When you actively recall information, apply it to solve problems, teach it to others, or use it in different contexts, you're firing those neurons intensely and repeatedly. The pathway gets reinforced quickly. This is why active learning methods are exponentially more effective than passive methods. Third implication: spaced repetition is crucial for permanence. If you learn something once intensely, you create a pathway. But if you never travel it again, the forest grows back and the path disappears. This is forgetting. However, if you revisit that pathway at strategic intervals, you maintain and strengthen it. Each review is easier and faster, and eventually the pathway becomes so strong it's essentially permanent. Let me share a fascinating study that demonstrates this. Researchers compared 2 groups learning vocabulary. Group A studied words once for 30 minutes total. Group B studied the same words for 5 minutes, then again after 1 day, again after 3 days, again after 1 week, and again after 2 weeks. Total study time was also 30 minutes, just distributed differently. When tested 1 month later, Group A remembered about 20% of the words. Group B remembered over 80%. Same effort. Distributed timing. 4 times better retention. This is the spacing effect, one of the most robust findings in cognitive psychology. Your brain consolidates learning during rest periods between study sessions. By spacing your learning, you give your brain time to strengthen those neural pathways during sleep and downtime. Cramming everything into one session doesn't allow this consolidation, so retention is poor. Now let's talk about the role of sleep in learning. This is critical and almost universally undervalued. During sleep, particularly deep sleep and REM sleep, your brain replays the neural patterns you activated during learning. It's literally rehearsing what you learned, strengthening those pathways without your conscious effort. Studies show that sleep after learning improves retention by 40 to 60% compared to staying awake. This means, if you learn something new and then stay up all night, you've wasted much of your effort because your brain didn't get to consolidate that learning. But if you learn something and then sleep well, your brain automatically reinforces those pathways while you rest. Sleep is not downtime from learning. It's when deep learning happens. Here's a practical application. Study difficult material before bed. Your brain will work on it while you sleep. Never pull all-nighters before exams. You're sabotaging the very consolidation process that would help you retain information. Prioritize sleep as part of your learning strategy, not as something that competes with learning. Let's discuss attention and focus, because these determine what your brain actually processes. Your brain is constantly bombarded with sensory information. If you tried to consciously process everything, you'd be overwhelmed. So your brain filters ruthlessly, paying attention to what seems important and ignoring the rest. Here's the implication. If you're distracted while learning, your attention is divided, and neural activation is weak. Your brain is barely processing the information because its attention is elsewhere. This is why multitasking destroys learning. When you study while checking your phone, watching TV, or chatting with friends, you're creating extremely weak neural pathways. It feels like you're learning, but neurologically, almost nothing is happening. Contrast that with deep focus on a single task. When you give undivided attention to learning material, your brain's full processing power engages. Neural activation is intense. Pathways form quickly and strongly. This is why 30 minutes of focused study produces more learning than 3 hours of distracted studying. Quality of attention matters far more than quantity of time. Now let's explore the concept of cognitive load and why trying to learn too much at once backfires. Your working memory has limited capacity, about 3 to 5 chunks of information at a time. When you try to process more than this simultaneously, you overload working memory, and learning effectiveness plummets. This is why trying to learn everything about a complex subject in one sitting is counterproductive. You need to chunk information into digestible pieces, master each piece, then combine them. Think of it like learning to juggle. You don't start by trying to juggle 5 balls. You start with 1 ball, master the motion, add a second ball, master the pattern, then gradually add more. Learning works the same way. Here's a powerful technique called interleaving. Instead of practicing one thing until you master it, then moving to the next thing, you alternate between multiple related skills or concepts. Research shows this creates deeper learning because your brain must actively discriminate between concepts and strengthen each neural pathway more robustly. For example, if you're learning mathematics, don't do 20 algebra problems, then 20 geometry problems, then 20 calculus problems. Mix them. Do 2 algebra, 2 geometry, 2 calculus, repeat. This forces your brain to actively retrieve the right approach for each problem type rather than falling into autopilot on one type. It feels harder initially, but produces much stronger learning. Let me share one final neurological insight. Emotion amplifies learning. When you experience strong emotion while learning, your brain releases neurochemicals that enhance neural pathway formation. This is why you remember emotional events vividly but forget mundane information easily. The emotion tagged that memory as important, and your brain prioritized its consolidation. Practical application. Connect learning to emotions whenever possible. Make it exciting, curious, challenging, or personally meaningful. Dry, boring learning produces weak neural activation. Emotionally engaging learning produces strong, lasting neural pathways. This is why storytelling is such a powerful teaching method. Stories create emotional connection that enhances memory. As we close this chapter, here's what you need to understand. Your brain learns through active neural pathway formation, strengthened by repetition, consolidated during sleep, enhanced by focused attention, optimized by spaced practice, and amplified by emotion. Traditional learning methods ignore most of these principles. Speed learning methods leverage all of them. Every technique we'll explore in coming chapters is designed to work with your neurology, not against it. When you align your learning methods with how your brain actually functions, learning accelerates dramatically. You're not fighting your biology. You're optimizing it. Now let's explore the meta skill that multiplies everything. Learning how to learn. Chapter 2. Meta learning. Learning how to learn anything. There's a skill that sits above all other skills. A meta skill that determines how quickly you can acquire any other ability. It's called meta learning. Learning how to learn. Master this, and every other learning task becomes exponentially easier. Ignore this, and you'll struggle unnecessarily throughout your life. Meta-learning is the systematic approach to deconstructing any skill or body of knowledge, identifying the most efficient learning methods for that domain, and creating a customized learning plan that maximizes results with minimum wasted effort. It's strategic learning rather than random learning. Most people approach learning reactively. They want to learn something, so they Google it, maybe buy a book or course, and start consuming content without strategy. This is like trying to build a house by randomly nailing boards together. You might eventually create something, but it'll take forever and the result will be poor. Meta-learners approach learning proactively. Before they start learning, they research the skill itself. They ask, what are the core components of this skill? What's the 20% that produces 80% of results? Who has mastered this skill most efficiently? What methods did they use? What common mistakes do beginners make? How can I structure my practice for optimal progress? Only after answering these questions do they begin actual learning. This front-loaded strategic thinking seems like it would slow you down, but it actually accelerates learning dramatically. Spending a few hours or days researching how to learn something saves weeks or months of inefficient practice. It's the classic, give me 6 hours to chop down a tree and I'll spend the first 4 sharpening the axe. Let me show you the meta-learning framework step by step. Step 1. Deconstruction. Break the skill down to its fundamental components. Most skills seem overwhelming when viewed as one massive thing. But every complex skill is actually a combination of smaller sub-skills. Your job is to identify these components. Example: public speaking seems like one big skill. But deconstruct it and you find voice projection, pacing and pausing, body language, eye contact, storytelling structure, handling nerves, audience engagement, slide design if using presentations. Each is a separate sub-skill. By learning these components individually and then integrating them, you master public speaking much faster than trying to improve public speaking as one vague concept. Step 2. Identify the vital few. Once you've deconstructed the skill, apply the Pareto principle. Which 20% of components produce 80% of results? Not all sub-skills are equally important. Some are absolutely critical. Others are nice-to-have refinements. Focus on the critical components first. For language learning, the vital few might be the 500 most common words, basic grammar patterns for present and past tense, pronunciation of key sounds, and conversational phrases for common situations. Master these first and you can have basic conversations. Learning advanced grammar rules or rare vocabulary can come later. They're in the 80% that produces 20% of results. Step 3. Research best methods. How have others learned this skill most efficiently? Read books, interviews, and case studies of people who mastered the skill quickly. Look for commonalities in their approaches. Identify techniques that appear repeatedly. Avoid methods that seem inefficient or that experts don't recommend. This research prevents you from wasting time on ineffective methods. For example, if you're learning a language and you research polyglots who speak 10 languages, you'll discover they almost never use translation apps or grammar textbooks as primary methods. They use immersion, conversation practice, and comprehensible input. This research saves you from months of ineffective textbook studying. Step 4. Create deliberate practice plan. Deliberate practice is focused, intentional practice with immediate feedback on specific skills. It's the opposite of mindless repetition. Your meta-learning research should reveal what deliberate practice looks like for your target skill. Then create a structured plan that schedules this practice consistently. Step 5. Establish feedback loops. Learning without feedback is guessing. You need mechanisms to know whether you're improving and what needs adjustment. This might be a coach, peer review, self-recording and analysis, or objective measurements. The faster and more accurate your feedback, the faster you improve. Step 6. Optimize and iterate. As you practice, you'll discover what works well for you and what doesn't. Meta-learning isn't a one-time planning session. It's ongoing optimization. Continuously ask, what's working? What's not? How can I adjust my approach to learn faster? Let me share a powerful example of meta-learning in action. Tim Ferriss, author of The 4-Hour Chef, wanted to learn to speak basic Japanese in 3 months before a trip. Instead of signing up for traditional classes, he used meta-learning. He researched how the most successful language learners operate. He discovered they focus on frequency, learning the most common words and grammar patterns first. He deconstructed Japanese to the most useful components: 600 common words, basic grammar patterns, polite and casual registers, and pronunciation of key sounds. He found that learning these specific components would allow functional conversation. He designed a practice routine, spaced repetition for vocabulary, conversation practice with native speakers via language exchange apps, listening to comprehensible input podcasts during downtime, and deliberate grammar pattern practice. 3 months later, he could hold functional conversations in Japanese, enough to navigate his trip successfully. Meanwhile, people who'd been taking traditional classes for years still couldn't hold basic conversations because they'd been learning in inefficient ways. Too much grammar theory, too little speaking practice, random vocabulary instead of high-frequency words. That's meta-learning. Strategic deconstruction, focused practice on vital components, and optimized methods produced in 3 months what traditional approaches couldn't produce in years. Now let's discuss learning transfer, a crucial meta-learning concept. Transfer is when skills learned in one domain help you learn related domains faster. The more you understand transfer, the more efficiently you can build expertise across multiple areas. There are 2 types of transfer. Near transfer is when skills transfer to closely related domains. If you learn piano, that knowledge transfers relatively easily to keyboard or organ. Far transfer is when principles learned in one domain apply to distant domains. Learning chess might improve your strategic thinking, which helps in business strategy even though the domains seem unrelated. Meta-learners actively look for transfer opportunities. They ask, what have I already learned that relates to this new skill? How can I leverage existing knowledge? What principles from other domains might apply here? This accelerates learning because you're not starting from zero. You're building on existing neural pathways and adapting them to new contexts. Here's an advanced meta-learning technique: learning in public. Document your learning journey publicly through blog posts, videos, or social media. This creates multiple benefits. Teaching what you learn reinforces your understanding. Public accountability motivates consistent practice. Feedback from audience members points out gaps in your knowledge. And connecting with others learning the same skill creates community support. Many successful speed learners use this approach. They start learning something new and immediately begin sharing their process, struggles, insights, and progress. The act of explaining concepts publicly forces deep processing that accelerates learning far beyond private study alone. Let me address a common question. How long does it really take to learn a new skill? Josh Kaufman, author of The First 20 Hours, researched this extensively. He found that for most skills, you can go from knowing nothing to being reasonably competent with just 20 hours of focused, deliberate practice. Not mastery, but functional competence. That's 20 hours total, not per day. If you practice 1 hour per day, that's 3 weeks to decent competence in almost any skill. The catch: those 20 hours must be deliberate practice using meta-learning principles, not random unfocused repetition. Most people spend hundreds of hours on skills without reaching competence because they practice inefficiently. 20 hours of smart practice beats 200 hours of mindless practice every time. As we close this chapter, understand this. Meta-learning is the force multiplier for all other learning. Invest time upfront to learn how to learn each specific skill most efficiently. Deconstruct the skill, identify vital components, research best methods, design deliberate practice, establish feedback, and continuously optimize. This strategic approach transforms learning from a frustrating grind into an efficient, enjoyable process that produces remarkable results quickly. Master meta-learning, and you unlock the ability to acquire any skill or knowledge you need throughout your life. That's true learning freedom. Now let's explore one of the most powerful specific techniques, the Feynman Technique. Chapter 3. The Feynman Technique. Understanding deeply. Not superficially, Richard Feynman was one of the most brilliant physicists of the 20th century. He won the Nobel Prize. He made groundbreaking discoveries in quantum mechanics. But perhaps his greatest skill wasn't his research. It was his ability to learn and understand complex concepts deeply and quickly. His secret: a deceptively simple technique that anyone can use to transform superficial knowledge into deep understanding. The Feynman technique is based on a profound insight. If you can't explain something simply, you don't understand it. Most people think they understand concepts when they can recognize them or repeat definitions. But recognition isn't understanding. True understanding means you can explain the concept in your own words, apply it to new situations, and teach it to someone who knows nothing about it. Here's the 4-step Feynman technique. Step 1. Choose a concept you want to learn. Write the name of the concept at the top of a blank page. Step 2. Explain it as if teaching a child. Write out an explanation of the concept using simple language, as if you're teaching it to a child or someone completely unfamiliar with the subject. No jargon. No complex terms. Force yourself to use plain language. Step 3. Identify gaps and review. As you write your explanation, you'll discover gaps in your knowledge, places where you can't explain clearly or where you resort to jargon because you don't actually understand the underlying concept. These gaps are valuable. They reveal exactly what you need to study more. Go back to your source material and focus on those specific gaps until you can explain them simply. Step 4. Simplify and use analogies. Review your explanation and simplify it further. Use analogies, examples, and stories to make abstract concepts concrete. The goal is an explanation so clear that anyone could understand it. If you've achieved this, you truly understand the concept. Let me demonstrate with a real example. Suppose you're trying to understand compound interest. Step 1. Write compound interest at the top of a page. Step 2. Explain it simply. Here's what someone might write. Compound interest is when your money grows, and then the growth also grows. It's like planting a tree. First year, the tree grows and produces 10 apples. You plant those apple seeds. Second year, you now have the original tree making 10 apples plus 10 new small trees, each making 2 apples. That's 20 more apples. Third year, you have even more trees making even more apples. Your orchard grows faster and faster because each generation of trees produces the next generation. Step 3. Identify gaps. While writing that explanation, you might realize you don't actually understand how interest compounds daily versus yearly, or how compound interest differs mathematically from simple interest. These are gaps to study. Step 4. Refine and simplify. Polish your explanation. Add more concrete examples with actual numbers. Maybe create a simple visual diagram. Once you can explain compound interest this clearly, you truly understand it. More importantly, this understanding is deep and permanent. You haven't just memorized a definition. You've internalized the concept. Here's why the Feynman technique is so powerful for speed learning. First, it forces active processing. When you try to explain something, you can't fake it. You immediately discover what you don't know. Passive reading lets you gloss over gaps in understanding. Active explaining exposes them ruthlessly. Second, it creates strong neural pathways. Remember from Chapter 1, active engagement strengthens learning. Explaining concepts is intensely active. You're retrieving information, organizing it, connecting it to analogies, and expressing it in your own words. This multi-layered processing creates robust neural pathways. Third, it prevents the illusion of knowledge. Many people read a chapter, feel like they understood it, and move on. But they've only achieved recognition, not understanding. A week later, they've forgotten everything. The Feynman technique eliminates this trap. If you can't explain it, you know immediately you haven't learned it yet. Fourth, it makes knowledge transferable. When you understand concepts deeply through simple explanations, you can apply them in new contexts. Surface learning stays trapped in the original context. Deep learning transfers broadly. Let me share how to apply the Feynman technique to different learning contexts. 4 reading books. After each chapter, close the book and write a simple explanation of the key concepts. Don't just summarize. Explain in your own words as if teaching someone. This transforms passive reading into active learning and dramatically improves retention. For attending lectures or watching videos, don't just take notes. After the lecture, use the Feynman technique on the main concepts. This reveals what you actually absorbed versus what you thought you absorbed. Then review the parts you couldn't explain. For learning technical skills like programming, after learning a new concept or technique, explain it simply in comments or documentation. Then teach it to a peer or create a tutorial. This forces deep processing that speeds mastery. For test preparation, don't just review notes. Practice explaining concepts out loud or in writing without looking at materials. This active recall combined with simple explanation is far more effective than rereading. Here's an advanced application of the Feynman technique. Use it to check your learning regularly. Many students spend hours studying but never check whether they've actually learned anything until the exam. That's too late. Instead, regularly self-test using the Feynman technique. Can you explain this concept simply? If yes, you've learned it. If no, you need more study. This immediate feedback accelerates learning enormously. Now let's discuss combining the Feynman technique with other learning methods. It pairs perfectly with spaced repetition, which we'll explore in the next chapter. Here's how. When you first learn a concept, use the Feynman technique to ensure deep understanding. Then schedule spaced reviews where you re-explain the concept from memory. Each repetition strengthens understanding and retention. It also pairs beautifully with deliberate practice. After practicing a skill, explain the principles behind it using the Feynman technique. For example, if you're learning a tennis serve, after practice, explain the biomechanics in simple terms. This connects physical practice with intellectual understanding, creating more complete mastery. Let me address a common concern. Doesn't this take a lot of time? Yes, initially. Explaining concepts thoroughly takes longer than just reading or listening passively. But here's the key. It takes much less total time than traditional methods because you learn things once and retain them permanently instead of relearning them repeatedly. Think about it. Passive reading is fast, but retention is poor, so you have to reread multiple times. Total time invested is actually quite high with poor results. The Feynman technique takes longer upfront but creates permanent understanding, so total time invested is lower with far better results. It's classic. Slow is smooth, smooth is fast. Here's a story that demonstrates the Feynman technique's power. A student named David was struggling in his physics class. He studied for hours but barely passed exams. Then he discovered the Feynman technique. Instead of just reading the textbook and highlighting, he started explaining each concept simply on paper as if teaching a friend who knew no physics. Initially, it was frustrating. He couldn't explain things he thought he understood. But this revealed his gaps. He'd go back to the textbook, focus on those specific gaps, then try explaining again. Gradually, he could explain concepts clearly. His test scores transformed from C's to A's. More importantly, he actually enjoyed physics because he finally understood it deeply instead of superficially memorizing formulas. Years later, he credited the Feynman technique as the skill that changed his entire academic and professional trajectory. He went on to become an engineer and used the same technique to rapidly master new technologies throughout his career. As we close this chapter, here's your assignment. Choose one concept you're currently learning or need to understand better. Use the Feynman technique. Write it out, explain it simply, identify your gaps, refine your explanation. Do this once, fully, and you'll experience the power firsthand. The Feynman technique transforms you from a passive consumer of information into an active master of knowledge. It's one of the highest leverage learning tools available. Master it, use it consistently, and you'll learn faster and deeper than you ever thought possible. Now let's explore how to make sure you never forget what you learn through spaced repetition. Chapter 4. Spaced repetition and memory systems. Never forget again, there's a brutal truth about learning that most people discover too late. You forget almost everything you learn within days or weeks unless you actively work to retain it. Hermann Ebbinghaus, a German psychologist, discovered this in the 1880s when he mapped the forgetting curve. His findings were shocking. Within 20 minutes of learning something, you forget 40% of it. Within 24 hours, you've forgotten 67%. Within 30 days, you've forgotten 90%. This is the forgetting curve, and it's the silent killer of learning. You invest hours studying, feel like you've learned something, then weeks later it's gone. You have to relearn it from scratch. This cycle wastes enormous amounts of time and creates the frustrating feeling that you can't retain information permanently. But here's the good news. The forgetting curve can be defeated through a technique called spaced repetition. This is one of the most powerful, scientifically validated learning methods ever discovered. Master it, and you can retain virtually anything you choose to remember for life. Spaced repetition works on a simple principle. Review information at strategically increasing intervals right before you're about to forget it. Each successful recall strengthens the memory and extends the interval before the next review. Eventually, the memory becomes so strong it's essentially permanent. Here's how it works in practice. You learn something new today. Tomorrow, you review it. That review is easy because it's still fresh, and it strengthens the memory. Now you wait 3 days before the next review. Again, you successfully recall it, strengthening it further. Next review is 7 days later. Then 14 days. Then 30 days. Then 60 days. Each successful recall makes the memory stronger and extends the next interval. Compare this to traditional studying where you might review something intensely before a test and never again. Without reinforcement, the forgetting curve destroys that knowledge within weeks. But with spaced repetition, you maintain the memory permanently with minimal total review time because reviews become less frequent as the memory strengthens. Let me share the mathematics that make this so powerful. Suppose you want to permanently remember 100 concepts. Traditional cramming might require studying all 100 concepts for 10 hours right before a test. You pass the test but forget 90% within a month. Total time invested, 10 hours. Retention after 1 year, near zero. Now use spaced repetition. Initial learning takes 3 hours. First review takes 1 hour. Second review takes 30 minutes. Third review takes 15 minutes. Fourth review takes 10 minutes. Fifth and subsequent reviews take 5 minutes each. Total time over 1 year, approximately 6 hours. Retention after 1 year, 95%. Less total time invested, exponentially better retention. This is why spaced repetition is a game changer for speed learning. You're not just learning faster. You're making learning permanent with less effort than traditional methods require for temporary retention. Now let's discuss the tools for implementing spaced repetition. The most powerful is a system called flashcards with spaced repetition software. The most popular app is Anki, though there are others like SuperMemo, Quizlet with spaced features, and RemNote. These apps automate the spacing intervals using algorithms based on cognitive science research. Here's how to use them effectively. When you learn something you want to remember, create a flashcard immediately. Front of the card has a question or prompt. Back has the answer. The app shows you cards when they're due for review based on your past performance. If you recall easily, the interval extends. If you struggle, the interval shortens. The algorithm optimizes for maximum retention with minimum reviews. But making effective flashcards is a skill itself. Poor cards create poor learning. Here are the rules for powerful flashcards. Rule 1. Make them atomic. Each card should test one specific piece of information, not multiple concepts. Bad card. What are the causes and effects of the French Revolution? Too complex. Good cards. When did the French Revolution begin? What was the main economic cause of the French Revolution? What political change resulted from the French Revolution? Atomic cards are easy to review and create clear knowledge. Rule 2. Use context and connections. Don't make cards that are isolated facts. Connect new information to existing knowledge. Include context that makes the information meaningful and memorable. Rule 3. Make answers concise. Long, paragraph-length answers are hard to recall and review. Keep answers brief, ideally 1 sentence or less. Rule 4. Use images when possible. Visual memory is powerful. If you can include a relevant image, diagram, or visual cue, do it. This creates dual coding, verbal and visual memory pathways that reinforce each other. Rule 5. Create cards from multiple angles. 4 important concepts. Make several cards that approach the knowledge from different directions. This creates richer neural networks and prevents pattern matching without understanding. Let me share how to apply spaced repetition to different learning domains. For language learning, create flashcards for vocabulary, grammar patterns, and useful phrases. This is how polyglots who speak 10+ languages maintain them. They review each language using spaced repetition, maintaining massive vocabularies with just minutes per day. For academic subjects, create flashcards for key concepts, definitions, formulas, and important facts. Medical students use this extensively. There's a famous spaced repetition deck called On King that contains thousands of medical school concepts. Students who use it score significantly higher on exams than those who don't. For professional skills, create flashcards for procedures, best practices, code syntax, client information, whatever knowledge you need readily accessible. A programmer might have flashcards for syntax in multiple languages, algorithm approaches, and design patterns. For reading retention, create flashcards for key insights from books you read. This transforms reading from passive consumption to active learning. You'll actually remember and apply what you read instead of forgetting it within weeks. Here's an advanced technique: interleaved spaced repetition. Instead of reviewing all flashcards from one subject together, Mix cards from different subjects. This creates more challenging reviews that strengthen learning through the increased difficulty. Your brain must actively discriminate between concepts rather than falling into pattern recognition. Now let's discuss the common mistakes people make with spaced repetition. Mistake 1. Creating too many cards. Enthusiastic beginners create hundreds or thousands of cards, then get overwhelmed by daily reviews and quit. Start small. Create cards only for information you genuinely need to remember long-term. Be selective. Quality over quantity. Mistake 2. Not reviewing consistently. Spaced repetition only works if you actually do the reviews. Missing reviews allows forgetting to happen, requiring relearning. Make reviews a daily habit, even if just 10 to 15 minutes per day. Mistake 3. Making cards before understanding. Don't create flashcards for concepts you don't understand yet. First, use the Feynman Technique to achieve understanding, then create cards to maintain that understanding long-term. Mistake 4. Passive card review. Don't just flip the card and look at the answer. Actively try to recall before flipping. This active recall creates the strong neural activation that strengthens memory. Let me share a success story. A student named Sarah wanted to become fluent in Spanish. She used traditional textbooks for years with minimal progress. Then she discovered spaced repetition. She created flashcards for the 3,000 most common Spanish words, essential grammar patterns, and useful phrases. She reviewed daily using an app that optimized her review schedule. 6 months later, she was conversationally fluent. The vocabulary was permanently in her memory. She could recall words instantly without translation. Total review time? About 15 minutes per day. Compare that to the hundreds of hours she'd wasted on ineffective textbook studying that produced minimal results. As we close this chapter, understand this. Forgetting is not a flaw in your brain. It's a feature designed to clear out useless information. But for information you want to keep, you must actively fight the forgetting curve through strategic review. Spaced repetition is the most efficient weapon for this fight. Start using spaced repetition today. Download Anki or similar software. Create your first 10 flashcards on something you're currently learning. Review them daily. Within weeks, you'll experience the power of having knowledge permanently accessible in your memory instead of constantly relearning the same things. This is how you build a foundation of knowledge that compounds throughout your life. Now let's explore the technique that multiplies the power of spaced repetition: active recall. Chapter 5. Active recall versus passive learning. The 5 to 10 times multiplier. If I could give you only one speed learning technique to use for the rest of your life, it would be active recall. This single method can make you 5 to 10 times more efficient at learning than traditional approaches. It's simple, scientifically proven, and devastatingly effective. Yet most people never use it because it requires effort and feels harder than passive studying. Active recall is the practice of retrieving information from memory without looking at your notes or source material. Instead of rereading your textbook, you close it and try to recall what you read. Instead of rewatching a lecture, you try to explain the concepts from memory. Instead of reviewing highlighted passages, you test yourself on the content. This feels harder than passive review because it is harder. And that difficulty is exactly what makes it so effective. When you struggle to retrieve information from memory, you're strengthening the neural pathways dramatically. Each successful recall is like lifting heavy weights for your memory. The effort builds strength. Contrast this with passive learning, rereading notes, highlighting text, watching lectures without engagement. These activities feel productive because they're easy and familiar. You can do them while half paying attention. But neurologically, they create minimal learning. You're not activating memory pathways. You're just superficially processing information that will be forgotten within days. Research consistently shows active recall produces 5 to 10 times better retention than passive review for the same time invested. Let me share a landmark study that demonstrates this. Researchers had students learn complex material, then split them into groups with different study methods. Group A reread the material 4 times. Group B read it once, then spent the remaining time testing themselves on the content using active recall. 1 week later, both groups were tested. Group A, who reread 4 times, remembered about 40%. Group B, who used active recall, remembered about 75%. Nearly double the retention from a single reading plus self-testing versus 4 readings. And long-term retention showed even greater differences. After 1 month, passive reading retention dropped to 15%, while active recall retention remained above 60%. This is the power of active recall. It transforms learning from a forgetting race into permanent knowledge acquisition. Here's why it works so well neurologically. When you passively reread, you're activating recognition pathways. I've seen this before. Recognition is a weak form of memory. It doesn't mean you can actually use the information. When you actively recall, you're activating retrieval pathways. Can I access this information when I need it? Retrieval is the strong memory needed for application. Every time you successfully retrieve information, you strengthen that retrieval pathway. The pathway becomes faster and more reliable. Eventually, recall becomes automatic. This is the difference between recognizing a concept when you see it versus being able to apply it spontaneously when facing a problem. Active recall builds the latter. Here's how to implement active recall in practical ways. For reading retention, after each section or chapter, close the book and write a summary from memory. Don't look back until you've extracted everything you remember. Then check what you missed and focus on those gaps. For lecture notes, don't just review your notes by rereading them. Cover the details and try to recall them from the headings. Or better yet, put your notes away completely and try to reconstruct the key concepts on a blank page from memory. For test preparation, create practice tests or use past exams. Test yourself repeatedly without looking at answers. This is far more effective than studying notes passively. The testing itself is the studying. For skill development, regularly test your skills without referring to guides or instructions. Can you execute this procedure from memory? Can you solve this type of problem without looking at examples? The struggle to recall and perform strengthens competence. Let me share some advanced active recall techniques. The blank page method. When learning a complex topic, regularly take a blank page and write everything you know about the topic from memory without any references. Start with the core concepts, add details, make connections. This reveals your actual understanding versus what you think you know. Then compare to your source material and identify gaps to study. The teach someone method. Explain what you're learning to another person without notes. This combines active recall with the Feynman technique. You must retrieve information and organize it coherently to teach. If no one is available, teach an imaginary student or record yourself explaining the concept. The teaching forces deep active recall. The question generation method. Instead of answering provided questions, create your own questions about the material, then answer them from memory. This adds an extra layer of processing. You must understand the material deeply enough to generate good questions, then recall the answers. This dual active recall creates extremely strong learning. Now let's discuss how to make active recall more effective. Principle 1. Struggle is good. When recall feels difficult, that's productive. Don't immediately look up the answer. Spend time trying to retrieve it. Even failed retrieval attempts, where you eventually have to look up the answer, strengthen the pathway more than passive review. Principle 2. Space your recall attempts. Use active recall combined with spaced repetition. Initial recall shortly after learning. Next recall after increasing intervals. This combination is devastatingly effective for permanent retention. Principle 3. Vary retrieval conditions. Don't always recall in the same way or same context. Sometimes write answers, sometimes speak them, sometimes draw diagrams, sometimes explain to others. This variety strengthens flexible retrieval in different contexts. Principle 4. Embrace desirable difficulties. Make recall challenging by testing yourself in different contexts, mixing topics, or adding time pressure. These difficulties feel frustrating but enhance learning significantly. Let me address the most common objection to active recall. It feels uncomfortable and slow. Yes, absolutely. Passive rereading feels smooth and easy. Active recall feels challenging and effortful. But remember, feeling of ease during learning doesn't correlate with actual learning. Often, the opposite is true. What feels easy produces shallow learning. What feels difficult produces deep learning. This is called the illusion of fluency. When you reread material, it becomes familiar. Familiarity feels like knowledge. But it's not. You've created recognition without retrieval capability. When exam time comes or you need to apply the knowledge, it's not accessible. Active recall prevents this trap by testing actual retrieval constantly. Here's a story that illustrates active recall's power. Two medical students, both intelligent and hardworking, used different study methods. Student A attended all lectures, took detailed notes, reread them multiple times, highlighted important parts, and reviewed constantly. Student B attended lectures, took minimal notes, then immediately after each lecture found an empty room and spent 30 minutes actively recalling and writing down everything he remembered without looking at notes. Then he checked what he missed and briefly reviewed those gaps only. Exam results? Student B consistently scored in the top 10%. Student A was average. Both studied for similar total hours. The difference was method. Student B used active recall. Student A used passive review. Active recall won decisively. As we close this chapter, commit to this. Stop passively reviewing. Start actively recalling. It will feel harder initially. You'll be uncomfortable. You'll want to look at your notes. Resist. The discomfort is growth. The struggle is strengthening your memory. Embrace active recall, and your learning efficiency will multiply 5 to 10 times. Now let's explore how to focus your learning effort where it matters most through the 80-20 principle. Understand Chapter 6. The 80-20 principle and deliberate practice. Imagine two people learning guitar. Person A practices 6 hours per day, working through every exercise in a comprehensive method book, learning songs they don't enjoy, and focusing equal time on all aspects of playing. Person B practices 2 hours per day, focusing exclusively on the chord progressions and techniques used in the songs they want to play, ignoring everything else, and concentrating heavily on the specific skills where they're weakest. 6 months later, Person B can play the songs they wanted to learn and sound good doing it. Person A has covered more material but can't play any complete songs well. They've spread their efforts so thin that nothing was mastered. Person B applied the 80-20 principle and deliberate practice. Person A did not. The 80-20 principle, also called the Pareto principle, states that roughly 80% of results come from 20% of efforts. In any skill or body of knowledge, a small percentage of components produce the majority of results. The key to speed learning is identifying that vital 20% and focusing there first. For language learning, 20% of words account for 80% of usage in everyday conversation. The 500 to 1,000 most common words in any language will allow you to understand most conversations and express most ideas. Yet traditional language learning spreads effort equally across thousands of words, including rare vocabulary you'll never use. This violates the 80-20 principle and drastically slows learning. Speed learners identify the vital 20%. They learn the most common words first. They focus on conversational grammar patterns before advanced literary structures. They practice speaking common topics before rare situations. In 3 months focusing on the vital 20%, they achieve more practical language ability than years of unfocused traditional study. Here's how to apply the 80-20 principle systematically. Step 1. Identify what results you actually want. Be specific. Don't say, learn piano. Say, play 10 songs I love fluently. This clarity allows you to identify which skills matter. Step 2. Deconstruct the skill and identify the vital 20% that produces your desired results. For those 10 songs, what chord progressions appear repeatedly? What techniques are essential? What theory knowledge is necessary versus merely interesting? Focus on the essential. Ignore the rest, at least initially. Step 3. Practice the vital 20% disproportionately. Spend 80% of your practice time on the 20% of skills that matter most. This concentrated effort produces rapid visible progress. Step 4. Add the remaining 80% only after mastering the vital 20%. Once you've achieved your initial goals, you can broaden into the full depth of the skill. But achieve functional competence first through focused practice. Now let's discuss deliberate practice, which determines how quickly you master that vital 20%. Deliberate practice is focused, intentional practice on specific weaknesses with immediate feedback and continuous adjustment. It's the opposite of mindless repetition. Most practice is what Anders Ericsson, who researched expert performance, calls naive practice. Repeating what you're already comfortable with. A guitar player plays the songs they already know. A basketball player takes shots they're already good at. This feels productive but produces minimal improvement because you're not working on weaknesses. Deliberate practice is uncomfortable. It focuses specifically on what you can't do well yet. The guitar player works on the difficult transition they keep messing up. The basketball player practices weak hand dribbling. Progress is slower initially because the task is hard. But this focused practice on weaknesses is what creates actual improvement. Here are the essential components of deliberate practice. Component 1. Specific goals for each practice session. Not practice guitar, but master the F chord transition smoothly at tempo. Specific goals allow focused effort and clear measurement of success. Component 2. Full concentration on the practice. No distractions, no multitasking. Deliberate practice requires complete mental engagement. You're analyzing performance in real time, identifying errors, adjusting technique. Component 3. Immediate feedback. You need to know instantly whether you performed correctly. This might be a coach, video recording, objective measurement, or self-assessment against a clear standard. Without feedback, you can't correct errors. Component 4. Working at the edge of your current ability. If practice is too easy, you're not improving. If it's impossibly hard, you'll make no progress. Deliberate practice operates at the edge, challenging but achievable with effort. This is where growth happens fastest. Component 5. Repetition with adjustment. You don't just repeat the same action mindlessly. You repeat with constant small adjustments based on feedback, gradually improving execution. Let me share how to structure deliberate practice sessions. Before practice, identify your specific weakness to work on. During practice, focus exclusively on that weakness. Push yourself to the edge of ability. Get immediate feedback on each attempt. Make small adjustments. Repeat. After practice, reflect. What improved? What still needs work? What will you focus on next session? This is vastly different from typical practice where people just do the activity without strategic focus on weaknesses. Deliberate practice is mentally exhausting, which is why it's typically limited to a few hours per day at most. But those few hours produce more improvement than 10 hours of naive practice. Here's a powerful combination. Use the 80-20 principle to identify what to practice. Then use deliberate practice to maximize how quickly you master it. This is the speed learning formula. Focused effort on vital components. Let me share a story. Two aspiring writers wanted to improve their craft. Writer A wrote every day for 2 hours, working on whatever project interested them, writing comfortably in their established style. Writer B spent 1 hour per day on deliberate practice, analyzing great writing, identifying specific techniques they struggled with, practicing those techniques in isolation with immediate feedback from writing groups, pushing themselves to write in uncomfortable new styles. 1 year later, Writer B's improvement was dramatic. They developed versatile skills and professional quality writing. Writer A had written more total volume but showed minimal improvement. They'd practiced, but not deliberately. Writer B practiced half as long but improved 5 times as much because their practice was deliberate and focused. As we close this chapter, understand this: all practice is not equal. Unfocused practice on everything produces slow, frustrating improvement. Focused, deliberate practice on the vital 20% produces rapid, satisfying mastery. Use the 80-20 principle to identify what matters. Use deliberate practice to master it quickly. This combination is how you compress years of learning into months. Now let's bring everything together and discuss building your comprehensive learning system. Underscore Chapter 7. Building your comprehensive learning system. We've explored individual techniques: meta-learning, the Feynman Technique, spaced repetition, active recall, the 80-20 principle, and deliberate practice. Each is powerful alone. But the real magic happens when you combine them into a comprehensive learning system that compounds their effects. Think of these techniques as tools in a toolkit. A carpenter doesn't use just a hammer or just a saw. They use the right tool for each part of the job and combine tools strategically. Similarly, master learners don't just use one technique. They orchestrate multiple methods into a systematic approach that produces extraordinary results. Let me show you how to build your personal learning system step by step. This is the framework you'll use for learning anything, from languages to technical skills to academic subjects to professional knowledge. Master the system, and you'll be able to acquire new expertise faster than you ever imagined possible. Step 1. Set clear learning objectives using the SMART framework. Specific. Exactly what do you want to learn? Measurable. How will you know you've learned it? Achievable. Is this realistic given your starting point and resources? Relevant. Does this align with your goals? Time-bound. What's your deadline? Instead of learn programming, say, build 3 functional web applications using JavaScript within 4 months, demonstrating competence in front-end development. This clarity focuses your effort and allows tracking progress. Step 2. Use meta-learning to research and plan. Before diving into learning, spend time researching the most efficient path. Deconstruct the skill. Identify the vital 20%. Research how experts learned it. Find the best resources. Create a learning plan that maximizes efficiency. This upfront investment of a few days saves months of inefficient learning later. You're sharpening the axe before chopping the tree. Step 3. Create a practice schedule that incorporates spaced repetition. Don't cram all practice into intense periods. Distribute learning over time. Schedule regular practice sessions, daily if possible. Use spaced intervals that allow consolidation between sessions. Example schedule: Monday through Friday, 1 hour of focused practice. Saturday, review and consolidation. Sunday, rest for brain recovery. This consistency creates momentum and allows the spacing effect to work. Step 4. Use active learning methods, never passive ones. In every practice session, engage actively. Use the Feynman technique to ensure understanding. Use active recall instead of passive review. Create flashcards for spaced repetition of key information. Test yourself constantly. Teach what you're learning to others. Step 5. Implement deliberate practice focused on weaknesses. Don't just practice what you're comfortable with. Identify your weakest areas and work specifically on those. Push yourself to the edge of current ability. Get feedback, adjust, repeat. Step 6. Track progress objectively. Keep a learning journal. Record what you practiced, insights gained, struggles encountered, progress made. Review regularly to identify patterns and adjust your approach. Objective tracking prevents the illusion of progress and keeps you honest about actual improvement. Step 7. Build in reflection and adjustment cycles. Weekly, review your progress. What's working well? What's not? How can you adjust your approach? Monthly, assess whether you're on track for your goals. Quarterly, evaluate whether your learning objectives are still relevant or need updating. Let me show you this system in action with a real example. Sarah wants to become conversationally fluent in French in 6 months. Here's her system. Week 1. Meta-learning research. She studies how polyglots learn languages efficiently. She discovers the vital 20%, the 1,000 most common words, basic grammar patterns, pronunciation fundamentals, and conversational practice. Week 2. She builds her learning toolkit. She creates a spaced repetition deck in Anki for vocabulary. She finds a conversation partner for weekly practice. She downloads comprehensible input audio for daily listening. She sets up a language journal for active writing practice. Months 1 through 6. Daily routine. Morning. 15 minutes of spaced repetition vocabulary review. Commute. 30 minutes of comprehensible input listening. Evening. 30 minutes of active recall, writing in her journal in French about her day, using only vocabulary and grammar she's learned. Once per week, 1-hour conversation practice with native speaker, deliberately practicing weak areas. Weekly, she reviews her journal entries, identifies grammar patterns she struggles with, and creates targeted flashcards. Monthly, she records herself speaking French, listens back, identifies pronunciation weaknesses, and practices specifically on those sounds. Result after 6 months. Conversational fluency achieved. She can discuss everyday topics comfortably, understand native speakers in most contexts, and express complex ideas. Total daily time investment. About 75 minutes. Total achievement. What traditional methods take 3 to 5 years to accomplish. That's the power of a systematic approach. Each technique supports the others. Spaced repetition maintains vocabulary. Active recall strengthens grammar. Deliberate practice improves weak areas. Feynman Technique ensures understanding. The 80-20 principle keeps focus on what matters. Meta-learning optimized the entire approach. Now let's discuss how to maintain motivation throughout the learning journey. Motivation naturally fluctuates. Here's how to sustain it. First, make progress visible. Track metrics. Words learned, practice hours completed, skills mastered. Seeing progress creates momentum. Second, celebrate small wins. Don't wait until complete mastery to acknowledge success. Celebrate each milestone, each week of consistent practice, each breakthrough. This positive reinforcement sustains motivation. Third, connect with a learning community. Find others learning the same skill. Share progress, challenges, insights. Community accountability and support dramatically increase adherence to practice schedules. Fourth, focus on intrinsic motivation. Don't just learn because you should. Learn because the skill itself interests you or because mastering it enables goals you care about. Intrinsic motivation sustains effort far better than external pressure. Fifth, make learning enjoyable. Find ways to practice that you actually enjoy. Learn songs you love. Read content that fascinates you. Practice skills in contexts that engage you. Sustainable learning must be at least somewhat enjoyable. Let me address the common challenge of learning plateaus. Every learner hits periods where progress seems to stall. You're practicing consistently, but improvement isn't visible. This is normal. Often, your brain is consolidating skills beneath conscious awareness. Breakthrough is coming. How to handle plateaus. First, trust the process. Keep practicing consistently. Second, slightly increase difficulty. Maybe you've adapted to current level and need new challenges. Third, get external feedback. Sometimes improvement is happening, but you can't see it yourself. Fourth, review your fundamentals. Sometimes advancing requires strengthening foundations. As we close this chapter, remember, learning is a skill. The more you practice learning itself, the better you become at it. Your first attempt at systematic learning might feel awkward. By your third or fourth skill, you'll be remarkably efficient because you've developed meta-learning competence. Build your system. Use it consistently. Refine it continuously. And watch as you acquire skills and knowledge at speeds you never thought possible. You're now equipped with the complete speed learning toolkit. Let's bring everything together in the conclusion. Conclusion. Your speed learning journey begins now. We've covered extraordinary ground together in this audiobook. From understanding how your brain actually learns through neuroplasticity and neural pathway formation, to mastering meta-learning and learning how to learn anything efficiently, from using the Feynman technique to ensure deep understanding, to implementing spaced repetition for permanent retention, from leveraging active recall to multiply learning effectiveness, to applying the 80-20 principle and deliberate practice for focused improvement, and finally building a comprehensive learning system that combines all these techniques. You now possess knowledge that most people never acquire. You understand the science of learning. You have specific, proven techniques for accelerating knowledge and skill acquisition. You have a framework for approaching any learning challenge systematically. The question is, what will you do with this knowledge? Because here's the truth. Reading this audiobook has given you information, but it hasn't yet given you the skill. The skill comes from application. You must actually use these techniques, practice them, refine them through experience. Knowledge without application is just interesting trivia. Knowledge with application transforms your life. Let me give you a clear 30-day implementation plan. Week 1. Choose one skill or subject you want to learn. Apply meta-learning. Research how experts learned it efficiently. Identify the vital 20%. Create your learning plan. Set specific, measurable goals. Week 2. Implement the Feynman technique. As you learn new concepts, explain them simply without jargon. Identify gaps in understanding. Deepen your knowledge of fundamentals. Build strong foundational understanding. Week 3. Add spaced repetition. Create flashcards for information you need to retain. Set up a daily review habit. Begin experiencing the power of active recall combined with optimal spacing. Week 4. Implement deliberate practice. Identify your weakest areas. Practice specifically on those. Get feedback. Push yourself to the edge of ability. Measure improvement objectively. This 30-day sprint will accomplish 2 things. First, you'll make substantial progress on your chosen skill. Second, and more importantly, you'll internalize these learning techniques through direct experience. They'll become natural habits rather than abstract concepts. After 30 days, expand. Start applying these techniques to multiple areas of learning. Build your comprehensive learning system. Track your progress. Refine your approach. Gradually, you'll become a learning machine capable of mastering anything you choose to focus on. Let me share a vision of your future if you commit to this path. 5 years from now, you've mastered multiple skills that once seemed impossible. Maybe you're fluent in 3 languages. Maybe you've developed advanced technical skills that command premium income. Maybe you've acquired diverse expertise that makes you uniquely valuable in your field. Maybe you've become the polymath you always admired. How did this happen? Not through genius or luck. Through systematic application of speed learning techniques. A little progress each day. Focused effort on vital skills. Smart practice instead of mindless repetition. Spaced reviews that made knowledge permanent. Active recall that strengthened memory. The compound effect of effective learning methods applied consistently over time. Meanwhile, others who didn't learn these techniques are roughly where they were 5 years ago. They worked hard but used inefficient methods. They studied for hours but forgot most of what they learned. They wanted to acquire new skills but felt they didn't have time. They're frustrated, feeling like learning is hard and slow. You know the truth. Learning isn't inherently hard or slow. Ineffective learning methods are hard and slow. Effective learning methods are actually easier and faster because they work with your neurology instead of against it. Here's what I want you to understand deeply. The ability to learn quickly is the ultimate competitive advantage in life. Technology evolves. Industries transform. The specific knowledge that's valuable today might be obsolete in 10 years. But the ability to rapidly acquire new knowledge and skills? That's permanently valuable. That makes you adaptable, unstoppable, future-proof. Think about the implications. While artificial intelligence automates routine work, the humans who thrive will be those who can learn and adapt fastest. While industries transform, the professionals who succeed will be those who can rapidly master new technologies and methods. While the world changes at accelerating pace, the individuals who flourish will be those who've mastered learning itself. You now have the tools to be that person. The neuroscience of learning. Meta-learning frameworks. The Feynman Technique. Spaced repetition systems. Active recall strategies. The 80-20 principle. Deliberate practice methods. A comprehensive learning system. These are your tools. Use them. I want to leave you with one final thought. Learning should be joyful. When done correctly, learning is deeply satisfying. You experience the pleasure of understanding complex concepts. You feel the pride of mastering challenging skills. You enjoy the process of becoming more capable. If learning feels like a frustrating grind, you're using the wrong methods. Speed learning techniques don't just accelerate learning. They make learning more enjoyable because you see consistent progress. You understand deeply rather than superficially. You remember what you learn, and you apply knowledge successfully. This creates a positive feedback loop. Success breeds confidence. Confidence encourages more learning. More learning creates more success. Become a lifelong learner. Not because you should, because you can. Because these techniques make learning accessible and achievable. Because the world is endlessly fascinating and you now have the ability to explore any corner of it that interests you. Your speed learning journey begins now. Not tomorrow. Not next week. Right now, in this moment, with a decision to apply what you've learned. Choose your first learning goal. Begin your meta-learning research today. Start building your system. Take the first step. In 6 months, you'll be amazed at what you've accomplished. In 5 years, you'll be unrecognizable, having mastered skills you currently think are beyond you. All because you learned how to learn. Learn anything faster than anyone. Master the skills that matter. Build the expertise that creates value. Become the person who can adapt and thrive in any environment because you've mastered the ultimate meta skill, learning itself. Your transformation starts now. Learn fast. Learn deep. Learn forever. The world is yours to explore, and you now have the tools to explore it at speed.